Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to this forum hosted by the Green River Area Development District. My name is Kelly Thurman. I'm County Judge Executive in McLean County, and I currently serve as the Chairman of the Board for the Green River Area Development District. I want to welcome all of you to this event. I want to make you aware that we are live streaming this event on Facebook today. And any discussion or any comment made today, we would ask that you reach a microphone. All of these microphones are live, and but please adhere to that. Our format today is going to be one where we're going to ask all of our members of our state legislature that are here to come and bring some comments that they'd like to share. During that time, I would encourage you to take the little 3x5 note cards that are around, and we have plenty more of those if needed. But we would ask for you to submit any question that you have on that note card and pass those in. I will tell you we plan only to answer and address questions that are submitted in writing on note cards for us to use. We will try to do as many questions as we can as time allows. Our intent is for us to be finished or at least nearing completion by the 11 o'clock hour. So we're going to get started pretty quickly then. I would like to just mention there are a few people here that I would like to recognize and thank them for being with us. Members of our GRADD board that are here. I won't get them all, but I would like to recognize Mayor Steve Austin from the city of Henderson. Newly appointed Union County Judge Executive Adam Onan. Glad to have him here. Mayor Paul Sandifer from Beaver Dam. Mayor Betty Howard from Sacramento. And we have with us today a great friend to all of us in this room, former Judge Executive from Webster County, Jim Townsend. We're glad to have you with us today. So if I've missed you today, my apologies. We're glad all of you are here. We want all of you to feel at home and to take part in this forum. This forum is for you, for our communities, and for our region. I also want to welcome all of the groups of senior citizens from the various counties around. You're a very important part of our region and what we do in local government and state government, and we welcome you being with us as well. I'm going to begin today by first making mention that we have two legislators who send their regrets they were not able to be with us today, and that is Senator C.B. Embry and Representative Dean Shademore. And they sent their regrets, and we welcome any questions I'm sure you would like to submit to them. I'm going to begin today by first starting with the Senate of the state of Kentucky and ask, if you will, Senator Dorsey Ridley to come forth and make some remarks. We welcome him to our podium.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Judge. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's good to be here as usual. We come on a Saturday morning, and Jatan's kind enough and all the staff are kind enough to have something to eat. We appreciate that. Coffee's always good. Ron, I hope that picture didn't break the camera. Well, okay, good. I'm here to quick report. I'm going to try to stay under 5 minutes because I know that questions are more important than probably the opening statements of all the legislators that are here. But I would call the current session of the General Assembly, we started slow and methodical, and now it's for at least myself and those on the State and Local Government Committee, which Chairman Bowen has, that it's fast and furious right now, and it's all about the Senate Bill 1 and the pension plan that is before us. I can share with you that we had a meeting on Wednesday, and we took some testimony about the bill, and I asked some questions of Senator Bowen in regards to procedural questions once we found out that the bill that was before us was going to be replaced with a committee substitute. And late Thursday, I guess it was, that particular bill was placed out in the public domain, and I appreciate and applaud him for doing that. The next question is, when are we going to meet? And sometime, hopefully, we'll get a response for that, and that meeting will be about the current committee substitute that he has before us. As you can see, I'm wearing my button here on my, about pensions, because I think we made a promise to those current retirees and those current employees, and I think it's important. Thank you. I think that it's very important that we stand the course of what we've made a promise to you. I understand the fiscal responsibility of running our government. I've had the opportunity to do that for the 4th District and for the House of Representatives many years ago, and I understand that process, and I think we can continue to fiscally be sound and solid. The House has come with their version of a executive budget, and to be quite candid with you, I've got a copy of it and I've got the summary of it, but I have not had the opportunity to read it. I got it Friday as I left the Capitol. So I look forward to that, but my understanding is that funding is there for our pension plan, and I look forward to what is also in there for our public education. I appreciate the opportunity to serve you in the Kentucky State Senate, and look forward to the opportunity as the future moves forward, and I'll be here for questions, and I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you. Oh, and go Big Blue.
Next, I'd ask Senator Joe Bowen to come and share some thoughts with us. Welcome, Joe, to our podium.
Good morning. It's good to be with you all. And what a great crowd. And this is what government is all about, participation like this. And I'm really glad you're here this morning. And I would suggest to you that the big deal that I'm working on is packaged sewage treatment plants and trying to find a problem to those. So other than that, no, actually that is a huge problem, and I do have a bill out there that's going to hopefully bring some relief to that. But other than that, Senate Bill 1 obviously is something that I've been really deeply engaged in. And let me suggest to you this morning that I am the sponsor of that bill. That doesn't make me the sole author of that bill. There are many people that are the author of that bill, any one of which could actually be the sponsor. And I've said this publicly before, that had this bill started over in the House, Chairman Jerry Miller would have been the sponsor of it, but it started on our side. So because of my position as chairman of the Public Pension Oversight Board and chairman of state and local government, I'm the sponsor of that piece of legislation. Let me go through real quickly what this bill doesn't do. It doesn't put state employees or teachers in a 401k plan. It doesn't require teachers, state employees to convert to a new plan after 27 years. If you're in a defined benefit plan now, you will stay in a defined benefit plan until you decide to retire. It does not call for a 3% increase in health insurance, and it doesn't limit the amount that employees or teachers their salaries. It doesn't limit what their salaries, the amount that can be used to determine what your retirement is. So in other words, whatever you've accrued, whatever benefits you've accrued to date, you will be able to use those benefits to spike your pension. There will be a change going forward. We're going to change from a defined benefit to a hybrid cash balance plan for new employees. But the contribution level for this hybrid cash balance plan will be 17.105%, which is above the plans, the TRS plans benchmark of 15%. So that's a pretty high contribution rate. Be divided up this way would be a 9% contribution from the teachers, 6% from the state, 2% from the local districts. Extrapolate that out over a 30-year period. I'm doing this from memory. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of, and taking the average across the state of what a teacher salary would be, that extrapolates out to nearly $800,000, I think, was the number. So it's a good benefit. It's certainly a better benefit than most benefits that are out in the world today. It also assures that no one will ever lose money on their investments, which is a pretty good guarantee. I mean, if you're invested in the stock market, this last week you lost a lot of value because the stock market took a bad hit. But this plan guarantees that you won't lose any money. So I think that's an attractive benefit to have. We did have a committee sub, as Senator Ridley alluded to. Currently, the sub is getting scored, what we call a scoring process, where we have an actuarial analysis on it, and we're waiting on that scoring to come back. I talked with the head of the teachers' retirement system last night, and I think that actuarial analysis will be back to us early part of next week. At least that's what he conveyed to me. And in the event that we get it early in the week and people have time to look at this analysis, then we could vote on the bill Wednesday. We didn't vote on the bill this past Wednesday because I had the committee sub, but it was still hot, and we didn't want to just spring that on our members and not give them the chance to look over that committee sub. But now they've had plenty of time because it's been in the public domain for a couple of days now, and will be out there for perusal for nearly a week by the time we meet again. What the committee sub did was there's one group of state employees that I think it's the Tier 1A employees, and it's in a time frame of 2008 to 13. 2003 to 2008. We got a lot of different time frames in my mind. 2003 to 2008, the Tier 1A employees, they haven't paid anything for their health insurance to date. So we had written in the bill that they would have to make a 3% contribution, but after further examination, we decided that we would reduce that to a 1% insurance appropriation that they would have to make. That's one of the changes that we dealt with in the committee sub. We dealt with reciprocity of legislators, meaning that legislators won't be able to supersize their pensions. Obviously, that's that is something that should have never really taken place in years past, but it was an opportunity that a lot of legislators had, that they could use their years of service in the General Assembly and then go to a higher paying job and spike their pension benefits. So we changed that in the committee sub, made it prospective. We wanted to make it retroactive, but legal consequences to that, so we made it prospective, in other words, saying from this point going forward. We also changed the COLA reimbursement. It was at, the COLA was going to be at 0.75% in the original bill, and we changed that to 1%. So, so COLAs will be reduced by 0.5% in the current version, as opposed to 0.75. So that's what the amendment to the bill does. I think most of you all know the contents of Senate Bill 1, or at least I hope that if you ask questions about Senate Bill 1, that it comes from an informed position, because I have had to debate folks or talk with folks up to this point that haven't read the bill. And that's tough to do, you know, when you're talking to somebody and they haven't read the bill or they haven't read the summary, it's hard to have a, intelligent conversation about it. So I'm sure you've got some questions. I hope those questions are generated from the folks that actually have read through this bill. This bill puts us on a path to sustainability. It puts us on a path to paying down the unfunded liability, which is something that we haven't committed ourselves to. We've got at a minimum a $43 billion liability out there, and for the first time we're making a commitment to pay down this unfunded liability, which is a good thing because that assures everybody that's depending on a pension that you're actually going to have that pension benefit there for you when you retire. That's important. It saves, initially, this bill is projected to save over $4 billion. That's important. It puts us on a sustainable path going forward. It spreads the risk. Now the taxpayer is not assuming all of the risk in the plans. I think that's a good thing. It provides relief for local governments, or city and county governments that have had a huge increase in their pension liability because of an action taken by their board. Had nothing to do with this bill, but because of reduced assumptions made by the KRS board, it exposed local communities and local governments to a higher pension liability. We have provided relief to those folks. So that's a good thing. They're not going to have to swallow that whole debt at one time. They're going to be able to spread that out. I think that's important. This bill does end the inviolable contract, but that is not as dramatic as what it might seem, because with a hybrid cash balance plan, the plan basically speaks for itself. Defined benefit plans in a perfect world are good, but when bad things happen, they're unsustainable. And that's what's happened to us in the past. This formula that we use doesn't work. There again are systemic problems, and because of a flawed formula and flawed assumptions by an actuary, we've been trying to fund pension plans that no way could be funded with the formulas that we are using. To give you an example, when this formula was first put in place, people had a 16-year less of a life expectancy than they do today. So people are living 16 years longer on average now than they were when this plan was put in place. We never provided for that. We never funded for that. I've talked about this time and again, for this plan, for a defined benefit plan to work, all of these assumptions have to be perfect. And if they were, it would work. But bad things happen in this world, and when they do, these types of plans are unsustainable, and you accrue these huge liabilities. So this corrects all of that, and going forward, we're going to bring relief not only to those folks that are in the pension systems, but to the taxpayers. And it's a measure that's needed to have been taken many years ago. We've kicked the can down the road for many years now. It's a tough issue to take on. Nobody's wanted to tackle this issue. I honestly didn't relish the thought myself, but I thought it needed to be addressed. And that's what we go to Frankfurt to do, is to tackle the tough issues, the big problems. This bill does that. We've appropriated, including the last budget cycle and this budget cycle, we will have appropriated over $4 billion to our pensions. These are record amounts of money that we're putting into the pensions. But we're going to have to put $1 billion more every year to shore these things up. And but this plan, again, puts us on that path to do that, puts us on the path to recovery, puts us on a path to assure those folks in the systems that that pension's going to be there for them. So that's the premise of the bill, and I'm not going anywhere, so ask me whatever questions that you need to. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. It's my privilege now to introduce District 12 State Representative, Representative Jim Gooch. Let's make him welcome to the stage.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And this is the second meeting that we've had this morning, and it was mentioned at one of the other meetings that there's been over 600 bills filed this session, and I think we talked about 6 of them this morning. So what I'm going to do is we'll still talk about probably the ones you're really interested in later, but I want to talk about a couple other things that I'm doing that you may not have heard about. I know that a lot of people in my area have recently, and in all of Kentucky, have seen lots of increases in your utility bills, and probably 30 or 40% in the last 10 years. And much of the things that caused those were not things that were under control of the Kentucky General Assembly. A lot of it was regulations and stuff that came from Washington and other places. And but one of the things that we can control here is we can make sure that one section of the economy with people who have very I guess good incomes, that we don't shift their burden to people that are less fortunate. And so I have a bill out there, it's called the net metering bill. And what happened is that several years ago, as we passed the bill, we were trying to encourage rooftop solar at your home. And so what we did is we said, if you put on rooftop solar less than 30 kWs, any excess electricity that you generated, the utilities would have to buy it back from you, whether they need it or not, and they would have to pay you the exact same price that they would charge you electricity for. Well, you know, when you think about it, when you're talking about excess electricity, a solar panel is nothing more than a generator. It generates electrons. And but whenever the utilities sell you power at 10 cents or 11 cents or whatever it is, they not only have generation there, they have generation, transmission, distribution, resiliency and reliability of the grid. They have their legacy costs as far as paying off the debt service on whatever generation they have. And so when you force them to pay back at the same price all of those costs for something that's just generation, then what happens is that you really are shifting the cost to other people who don't have that rooftop solar to pay part of that grid and part of that other cost. And so what my bill does, it just says that we're grandfathering everyone in. So if anyone that has rooftop solar currently gets grandfathered in for 25 years. We're keeping all the things that, as far as the 1-to-1 ratio of whatever power you generate, you can take it off of your bill. We are not making it go into effect until 2019. And then here are some of the bigger concessions. We're actually going to, a lot of people say, well, you're trying to put rooftop solar out of business, and that's just simply not true. So what we're doing is we're actually increasing that 30 kW amount to 45 kW, which is a 50% increase in the rooftop solar projects or net metering projects would actually qualify. So we're not trying to put it out of business, we're actually increasing the projects that qualify. The other thing that we're doing is that now, a lot of people have felt like that the rate, maybe that utilities are going to have to pay a wholesale rate for any excess generation that you have. And so some people were trying to say that utilities would be getting this price at a very low price, these electrons, and that they would sell them and make a profit. So we have a concession that just says that if the utility companies every 2 years will have to go before the Public Service Commission and show that the price that they're paying for excess generation to rooftop solar panel owners is exactly the same cost that they can either generate the power for themselves or that they can purchase it. So we're making sure that they are getting a fair price. But what's happening now is because they're getting an excess price, they're actually using that to subsidize or pay their systems off earlier. And for most people, would have to pay at least $25,000 to $30,000 for a small rooftop solar installation. They're currently getting about a 30% tax credit from the federal government, and because the federal government subsidies already, the cost of that has come down about 70%. So we feel like that, you know, they're already getting subsidies from our tax dollars, and we just don't want to make, I don't want to make some poor retired person out there or some mom working 2 jobs raising 3 kids have to pay any extra because of someone who has the means to invest in rooftop solar. So that's what net metering law does. There's been a lot of misinformation out there about what it's all about, but it really is a fairness issue. And people may argue that right now the cost is negligible, but as that increases, at the rate it's increasing, it really will some point make poor people have to pay for someone else's who can really afford that type of investment. So that's one bill. Another bill that I just filed this week that you may, there's been a lot of really concern out there. I think we're all sickened by the shootings that have taken place recently, one here in Kentucky. And what happens is there's always a crowd to do something. And often the first thing that people want to talk about is gun control. And the thing about gun control is that that's kind of a divisive type thing, and probably really we have more guns in this country than we do people. And we can all agree that certain people shouldn't own guns. We can try to keep guns out of the hands of some people, but changing that system right now is not going to be something we can do very easily. We do know that part of the problem is that it's not only a problem with guns, it's also a problem with mental illness. And one of the problems that we have now is that most of these shooters have been juveniles or people that are very close to being juveniles. And we in this country, we want to stop them from buying guns, but we actually seal juvenile records. So how are you going to be able to do a background check on someone to go in and buy a gun when we've actually sealed their juvenile records? And so we can't really identify some of the people that have some of the problems. So we need to work on those kind of things. But I have a bill that schools are soft targets. They're listed as gun-free zones, and so what happens is that if someone goes into school, they know there aren't any guns there. And I do have a bill that just says a school district can do two things. One, they can hire a resource officer who's someone that's armed, police officer or whatever, to be there in the school system, or they can do something else. They can allow a group that's kind of an emergency response team from 2 to 6 people. These are people that are in school who want to do this, that would take the training, who would go through background checks, who would continue to retrain every year, and those people would be allowed to be able to have guns in the school system. So I know that's a little bit controversial, but most people, most of the people that are parents really want something like this. But anyway, the parents that I'm talking to that have kids there, and some of the school teachers do as well. So again, it's a debate we're going to have. We know it's a little bit controversial, but that's something. At least at this point, it's just a bill form that we will have a debate on. We'll discuss that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions later, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Let me remind you that as you hear different topics of legislation being discussed, to submit any questions you'd have, continue to fill those cards out and get them to us, and we'd be glad to address those at the conclusion of the remarks. I want to welcome now to the podium State Representative Suzanne Miles, who represents District 7. Welcome, Suzanne, to our podium.
Good to be with you all this morning. I'm going to go ahead and say first shout out to my Marine people in the back. They're on the back row. Love them dearly, and they come out often for these events. We appreciate them and many others. Where we've been spending, of course, the Senate side has been spending a lot of time on the pension issue, and they filed the bill on the pension side, but we have filed this past week. We passed it out of the committee on Wednesday afternoon and then passed it on the House floor on Thursday, the proposed budget for the next 2 years. And so that's where I've been spending a lot of my time. I'm the Budget Review Subcommittee Chair for General Government, including coal severance. And so at this point, I'll go ahead and reference within that funding of general government is the joint funding agreement, which that addresses the Area Development District Flexibility Fund. So this is when Jatan stands up and does his happy dance right now on this.
On the table for you.
But that's one of the items that is the matching grants, and I know all the city and county officials that are in here know how important it is to have those matching funds whenever there's money that comes from the federal or any other area to be able to match those grants for water projects and block grants and all kinds of things, which is really important. There's a lot of other things within that. I know Sylvia's here with us today, and this budget actually restores the 6.25% cut that was to the Commission on Human Rights. And so we thought that was an important item to make sure that we got funding back in for that category at the state level. There's several different items. We referenced, and we've talked about it, there have been over 600 bills that have been filed in the House. As far as how many of those bills, and we get a lot of calls on different ones, and they'll throw a number at us, and unless it's specifically our bill and we're real familiar with that number, a lot of times we don't know exactly what that bill is, or it may never have been heard, it may have been filed. If you go through and read the titles of all the bills, you'll find out there's many, many bills out there that sometimes are filed just to make a point, to send a message, and that's not uncommon, but a lot of times those are not going forward. A lot of I want to go ahead and give accolades to the amount of time that has been spent on the pension bill and doing our very best to make sure that those that are retirees and those that are currently employees of our state and counties and cities have pensions going forward. So that's been a big focus that for many, many years there's been a blind eye to actually fund that the way that it should be funded. And so we're making a genuine effort to make sure that we're never in this situation again where we are the worst in the country of an unfunded liability on our pensions. There's lots of different categories, and I know we've got several people in the room, so I'll go ahead and sit down, and you all submit your questions by your cards, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on State Representative Robbie Mills, who represents the 11th District, to come and share some thoughts with us. Host, welcome.
Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today. Everybody's got their issues that they're interested in today, so we'll sit down real quick and answer some questions. But just over an overview of the last couple of years, obviously there's a change in philosophy of government in Frankfort now with the new majority party, and I think you're seeing with, if you're thinking, gosh, every year, I mean, last year, this year, there's weighty issues that we're talking about, and that's because of the change of philosophy in government. So we feel like as Republicans and conservatives that we need to address some issues in Frankfort that are have been addressed in a different way than what we believe government and how government should function. So that's the tension in Frankfort right now is that difference in philosophy. Pensions and budgets, obviously, we're going to be talking about those, but I think a couple of things to hit on. We're committing, we see the signs in Frankfort, find funding first. I think it is very, very important for you to realize that the House budget that's headed to the Senate has more general fund dollars committed to funding pensions and the pension debt than ever before. So that is our focus, that is our funding that we have found, and that's how we're funding, in the budget. So I think it's important that we're not glossing over that. No, we're not enabling and establishing a new tax for pensions. I doubt if you'll see that. But we are committing to taking a large sum of general fund dollars to pay toward that pension. A lot of us talked about that 2 years ago, and we're standing behind our word through this budget. So that's an important thing to think to keep in mind when you're thinking about pensions and budget. The other thing on the budget, the House budget was passed. Very education focused. If you're in education, we reestablished transportation funds for folks like Henderson County. We spend a little over $1 million. I think it's $1.1 million on transportation every year that we would have had to, the school system would have had to pick up if those funds were not reestablished. We're paying more in our budget right now. We have more in SEEK funding than ever before, an increase. We were looking at a decrease before we started the budget process. Now there's an increase. That's the dollar amount that goes per pupil to fund schooling. We also did something kind of unique, I think. We've got 13 or 14 school systems that may not have enough money to make it through this semester in their school. We passed a bill that is kind of a bailout bill for them. They're hurting from lack of coal severance tax and some other things. They're all in eastern Kentucky, and we have set up a fund that will help them fund the rest of their school year. And finally, we added the funding for retired teachers' health care. That's in our budget, and now that all goes to the Senate, and obviously we'll end up conferencing several weeks from now. So a couple other things just to touch on real quick. I see my friends here with Senate Bill 5 tags on. Obviously, I'm a small business advocate. Senate Bill 5 helps keep local pharmacies in business. It helps them in many ways. But it's very, very important to have a local pharmacist that's there that can compound things and can be there in case of major disasters, or anything can happen where we need local pharmacists that are there that know what they're doing, and we don't have to go to the big box store and wait in line and get things that they pull off the shelf. So that's a very important issue as far as being a small business advocate. A couple other things that I'll touch on real quick. Local government. I've got a bill that's made its way all the way over to the Senate and is waiting to be heard on the Senate floor that helps community service organizations that are like Habitat for Humanity, Salvation Army. It will allow the jail inmates to actually do work for Habitat, to actually learn a skill, and to also help provide better housing and affordable housing in our community. So many of the jailers were asking for that, and county judges should like that. And finally, one other thing on pensions. There's going to be a bill that I'm not sure if it's been filed or not. Somebody can correct me. But we're wanting to collar the increases. Local governments and agencies are going to see these pension contributions and go up and up and up. And we've got a bill that we'd like to file that'll keep that from only going up 10% per year for the next 5 years. That'll enable local governments to kind of plan their pension cost, and it'll make it more doable for them, and hopefully keep taxes down as well. Because if we dump these 30 or 40% pension costs on top of local governments, that was going to be an automatic tax increase that local governments were going to have to pass. So with those few, and then finally, the other local government issue dealing with CERS retirement was the possibility of separating the CERS plan from the other retirement plans to make those possibly more sustainable. Our mayor's asked us, Mayor Austin's asked me to do that, and I believe that is going to be also when the pension plan finally gets voted on. There'll be a plan to study that to see how that will work out. So with that, I'll sit down and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to call on District 13 State Representative DJ Johnson to come and share a few thoughts with us. DJ, welcome to this.
Well, thank you. Thank you to everyone that's here today. I will just start off by saying that it's an absolute honor to be here. As a first-year representative, it becomes more and more obvious to me that the responsibility that I have, and I'm honored and humbled that I get to be here today just to answer your questions and serve you. I won't rehash everything we've been talked about, that's been talked about so far. I will again mention that there's been over 600 bills filed in the House alone. Senator Bowen, did not file all 600 of them, as might be the possibility. But there's a few things I am working on. I don't want to stress that we have these big issues that we're talking about, and that's what we talk about almost to the exclusion of everything else. But there's a lot of other things going on in the session. Each representative, each senator has the things that they need to look at, or someone has brought to them to take a look at and see what they can do something about. And so there's some issues that people have brought to me that I'm trying to work on. I'm streamlining, or I've enacted legislation to streamline boiler procedures, inspection procedures, try to take some of the burden off of industry to be showing up for constant inspections by some state inspector when they just finished having that inspected by somebody else. That actually happens in the boiler industry. We're enacting legislation to stop that so that there's not duplicative efforts on our part, making the people out there trying to do their jobs have to over and over and over deal with another inspector. Doing the same thing in HVAC, reducing inspection requirements where we can and maintain safety. And also we're reducing some of the process to get our people qualified for these jobs. These jobs, there's opportunities out there for people to be in these jobs, and then people are trying to get there, and somehow state government gets in the way instead of trying to help that. So I'm working on some legislation there. Filed a bill that's actually going to change the deadline for when we're supposed to file and announce that we're running. It's simply to provide the county clerks a little more time to do their jobs as we come up to a primary, and I think it's probably going to make us a little more effective and productive during session as well. And then finally, one other thing I'm doing, I've been asked by a senator to carry his bill or be the sponsor of his bill in the House. It deals with notary publics. Doesn't seem like a big idea unless you've ever tried to get a notary public. The laws that we have in place now were put in place in 1956. They haven't been updated once since then. So that's just kind of the process of things that we do, trying to keep our state rolling, make us as productive as possible. We really are focused on that with the red tape reduction. We don't just want to do the big things. We want to make your life as easy as possible, and that's why we're there. And at least that's why I'm there. So that's some of the things I'm doing. We've got a lot of questions to go. I'm not going to take any more time. Again, honored to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next, I'd call on State Representative Matt Caslin, representing the 14th District. Would you make Matt and young Mr. Caslin welcome?
Well, I guess I'm going to hold my son here. He comes to work with me every Saturday, so he keeps asking when we get to go drive the tractor here in a little bit. So I'll tell you a few more minutes. But thank you all for coming out today. It's great to see a crowd gathered like this on a Saturday morning, giving time out of your day to come be part of the legislative process, to come voice your concerns. As most of everybody up here has talked, we have a diverse group of people working hard for the citizens of Kentucky. Over 600-something bills out of the House. And I can tell you, it's a whirlwind to keep up with them, especially when you start getting floor amendments and committee subs. And so one of the things I think that in Frankfort that we're really good about is we delegate. There's a lot of different diversity as far as who focuses on what, and then when it comes time to come to the floor, we all become very familiar with it so we can represent our constituents. But one that I've worked on, not to touch on the pension, I serve on 6 different committees, but one I want to touch on this morning that I've worked hard on all year. I was on a working group for infrastructure and transportation, which is a group that was looking into our road problems that we have. And you all seen last week probably House Bill 609 was filed. It's going to change the wholesale price floor for our gasoline to try to generate some revenue to be able to use on fixing our roads. We all know that everybody travels up and down the road to go from point A to point B. That it's something we utilize to take our children to school on, that we use in our businesses, that we use for going grocery shopping. And so it's important to all the citizens that we have safe bridges, safe roads to travel on. So something I'm proud that I worked on is to try to figure out a way how we can continue to improve them. And without the proper road funding available right now, we all see that our roads are getting in pretty bad shape. So I'm hoping this bill addresses that and starts to get us on the path of having better roads. And there's many other bills coming, but I don't want to take all the time up because I want to be able to see that some of the questions you all might have that are answered. So look forward to hearing your questions. Thank you.
While not listed on our agenda today, Mayor Tom Watson of Owensboro has asked to talk with us just for a moment about an issue that's near and dear to most everyone in this room. So, Mayor, we welcome you and look forward to hearing from you. Let's welcome Tom Watson to our.
Again, don't forget to write the questions. And please write so I can read it too.
Morning.
Thank you all for letting me have a couple of minutes. As chairman of the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a rotation between the mayor of Owensboro and the county judge executive for Davis County, their issue came up that it's kind of bothersome to everyone, and it had to do with some funding that was supposed to be dedicated to fixing an area at from mile marker 5.69 to mile marker 6.282 on US 60, which is where we're having a lot of the flooding. That money, in my understanding, was appropriated from Washington. Federal money came to Frankfurt, and somehow it never made it to the project that it was appropriated for. Now they changed the formula to what they call a shift now, and it's a transportation I'll have to read this to you. It's a point system to determine need. The project was scored in 5 categories: improving safety, preserving existing infrastructure, reducing congestion, fueling economic growth, and cost benefit under the KYTC new scoring system. And the Highway 60 project didn't make it. It actually, out of 100 points, it got 11. But the money was already there, and what I'm asking our group to do is, you know, in city government, which is a little bitty budget, it's got a big hole in it, but it's got a little bitty budget, and money comes in, and as elected officials, we have some of our commissioners here, it kind of gets transferred sometimes. And so we've been trying to figure out a way to keep track of the transfers, and all I'm asking is there's a possibility that, you know, when there is funding, federal money dedicated to a project, that there be a way for you to track that money once it comes into the to the state budget, so they can be used for the reason that it was appropriated. It goes to Matt's thing about economic development and construction and roads and everything else, because not only does it hamper the businesses out there, there are a lot of people that were affected by the flooding in that area. So I just ask that on behalf of the MPO, you take a look at it, see if you can keep track of it, and appreciate your time. And, you know, there's 213,000 citizens in GRADD, Green River, and that's how special you are, because you've made an effort to come here and be known. So I appreciate you being here, and thank you very much for your time.
My slide. Okay. I'll go ahead and kind of bring up something about that. We have had a road closure due to the flooding this past week, and Kimberly Clark, a good neighbor to our community and wonderful employer in our area, unfortunately had to shut down temporarily. We're looking forward to them opening either today or tomorrow. We've been in conversations with them quite a bit. I will tell you that the 5 state reps from Davis County and Henderson County all signed on to a letter this week, basically that was sent to the Secretary of Transportation and also the Secretary of Economic Development, requesting for some answers of exactly why that was not already completed at this time. It was on the road fund. Of course, basically we've had a transportation budget for many years that did not have money in it, and I know we've got several in this room can attest to several projects in that area, but I will tell you that we've been on conversations not only with those 2 groups, but also the governor's office, to make it very clear that we have a good partner with Kimberly Clark, want to take very good care of not only that company, but all of the Stanley Newman area, and make sure that we have safe areas for our community. So I'm cautiously optimistic that will be taken care of sooner than later. We brought it to their attention, not only on the side of the safety issue, but also the economic development side to it. So that has been worked on quite a bit this week, and we look forward to having it answered really soon. That letter went out, I believe it was Wednesday, and all state 5 representatives, we signed on to that to try to get some answers and see exactly why, if federal money was already designated, the way it was set up in the budget, it should have been completed last year, and it was not. The design phase has already been completed, so we are well on our way, and we're hoping to expedite that project as soon as possible.
Representative Mills?
Sure. I just want to piggyback on that just a little bit. Kind of goes to what I was talking about, the change in philosophy in government. Mayor mentioned shift program, and the shift program is now the new way that transportation is looking at projects and road projects, and it actually uses hard data and assesses points for particular projects. To whereas in the past, I think there's been a little bit of, hey, this is my project, can you help it move up? And that doesn't serve government well when there's kind of good old boy type things going on. When you have hard data that says, hey, this bridge is needed, this project is needed because of this, this, and this, and you prioritize your transportation spending, I mean, that's the way we do it in business, and that's the way we ought to do it in government. So hopefully you'll see that moving forward, that philosophy and that kind of thought process in transportation. So, thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move into our time of questions, and Jiten Shah, our Executive Director, has those questions. And just ask each of our legislators who would like to respond to those, just use these microphones at your seat if you like, or if you want to come to the podium, you're certainly welcome to, but we'll move on and try to get through as many of these questions as we can.
Thank you, Chairman. And again, welcome all of you. This is one of the largest crowd we had, for the legislative breakfast. So you can imagine a lot of good issues that on your mind. It's easy for us to even, taking time to come down in the morning and listen to all those things, but it's not as easy as what these guys has to, to face every day, not just from the people from GRADD, from all over the state. So, I do, applaud for their efforts and in doing especially some of the key issues that affect the state government and as well as local areas. I think Suzanne also already mentioned, do want to thank again, I think, people don't realize, with that kind of funding that you have in the JFA and the state budget, may be difficult to do what we need to do for the local governments, even including holding this kind of meetings and everything else. I'm going to start some of the questions, and quite a few questions are dealing with the pension, and most of the things have been answered so far, but I will bring it up, and I will try to do my best to read the handwriting. I want to thank Mayor Austin, smart enough to type the questions so I can read those things. Thank you, Mayor. Oh, the newspaper man, okay. I think his question dealing with the pension, I think he's to the 71% of the total current balance in the Kentucky Retirement Fund is owned by the CERS, and 63% of the participants in all funds also CERS, and also the CDRS funds is 61% funded. Shouldn't CERS have at least a representation on the Policy and Investment Board? That's one question. Also looking on the same side, on the level dollar funding, when compared to mortgage, by many, the CERS fund has a much lesser mortgage balance than the other funds. Shouldn't the parents reflect that? And the follow that with that national average on state pension fund balance in between 64-68%. What is the goal for CERS fund balance as a percentage? It's more dealing with the CERS as part of the KRS. So, Senator, I guess you may want to start the comments and see anybody else would like to add on those things.
Okay, so what, give me the first question again.
So 71, I think more or less, since CERS has a large number of funds and the members, should they have representation on the policy investment board?
Yeah, so that's been part of the conversation. I was the original sponsor of the separation bill last year, and I stood down on that because I knew it was going to be part of this bigger conversation. What the fear is with weighting the board in one direction or the other, and with CERS, the argument has been made that if you had weighted voting, let's say that the CERS members, their votes were weighted at 2 for 1, this type of thing, that politics might enter into this, in that they would drop the assumptions or actually raise the assumptions to a level that would not be indicative of what the true liability is. In other words, if you increase the rate of return from 5% to 7% or 8% or this type of thing, the liability is going to shrink. If you say that you're going to have payroll growth of 4% instead of 0, then your liability is going to shrink. And the argument has been made that if there was more influence for CERS, that those assumptions might not be realistic because local officials might not want those lower assumptions, in that it exposes more liability. Therefore, they're going to be faced with running a more efficient government, or they're going to have more constraints, and they're not going to want that in an election cycle. They're going to want a picture that looks much rosier at the local level than what lower assumptions would actually indicate. So that's the conversation to this, and we've been back and forth on it a lot. KCO, KLC, they've advocated for either weighted voting on the boards or separation, but it's not part of this legislation. Can it be taken up at some other time? Sure, it can be, and that would be a function, a statutory function of the General Assembly. At any point, they could pass legislation that would address that issue, but it is not part of the pension bill currently.
Thank you. Senator?
I've got two questions here, Mayor, and the answer to the first one with regards to representation on the board, yes, I think you should have equal representation to the amount of funds you have in the CERS. As for level dollar funding, my understanding from League of Cities is that they have a short-term arrangement fix that I don't know it's out there in the public domain yet, that would be equivalent to 12% of the current. Is that a correct number? Not 10, but 12. Is that correct? That's what I thought.
Yeah, Dorsey, let me answer that.
Please
Yeah,
do.
Please do. Yeah, that's part of Senate Bill 66, which has an emergency clause.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's a collared approach, and what we did with that was cap their pension liability payments at 12% over a 10-year period. So, they wouldn't be exposed to this huge liability all at one time, and we're giving them a pay down period of basically 10 years to face that increased
Not 5
liability.
to 10?
Right, that's
Okay.
part of the bill.
Okay. And then the last one here with regards to the national average of 64 to 68, you're at 61. That's a new number to me. 61's a new number. Is that
That's the number we're going, that's the number.
currently? Because it's been 58, 59.
That's the number we currently feel like that CERS is funding.
Yes, sir.
But it's 63% of the total participants, and that includes the 71% of the money in the pool.
Yes, sir.
That has all been put in by CERS members and participants.
And my understanding is under the CERS, cities, counties are responsible for that, not the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Exactly.
So if it goes broke, it's not our responsibility, although somebody would say, well,
It's not the
Cities
city's
can't go.
responsibility. Now, counties are in a different place. I
Yeah.
don't understand how counties fit into the states. It's a different thing than cities.
Okay.
Cities are capable of managing our funds, and we think we're capable of managing it better than it's been managed over the last 15 years, including the return on investment.
yes. And the last thing, dealing with politics, saying that local people can't take care of the politics. I agree with politics where we are in the state with what we've got. So I don't see a problem with the CERS going back to those who are contributing, and they control their own destiny. And as far as the national average with regards to the pension fund balance being at 64 to 68% average, We're close.
We're close. That's
We're
out there.
close.
That information is out there.
Got it.
Thank you, Senators. The next one is also kind of dealing with the pension as well. So why is 480 million being taken from the state retirees health plan to plug the holes in the budget? Does that make any sense with the fiscal deficits in funding for the pension plan? I guess a budget issue. Anybody would like to?
You want me to take a stab at that?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so that's a self-funded plan, okay? So it's really, what you do, you fund that self-funded plan to a level that you anticipate you're gonna need. But that money is really, it's really not there because you're only funding those, the experience that you had in the previous year. And so if we didn't have the exposure that we anticipated, then there is that gap. But that money was really never there because it's a self-funded plan. So, you know, it's just money that we anticipated, but actually, you know, we've had a healthier population in the state government than we anticipated. So we anticipated that there would be a bigger expense than there actually was.
Can I ask, I don't think this is the first time that's been done. Is that correct? This has been done.
Yeah.
And several times. I don't really like doing that. I don't like rating any of the funds.
Thank you.
We've done in the past, underground storage tank fund, we've rated parking funds and all other types of funds. I don't like that.
Thank you.
But this is not something this is the first time that's happened. It's been done a lot in the past.
Okay. Anybody else would like to make comment?
I would just say that I think it's the House Majority's philosophy, as Representative Gooch just said, not to sweep funds or take funds away, but the state, we do not have enough revenue to take care of the programs that are currently there. And this is a process, as Representative Gooch just said, that has happened at least the last 2 budget cycles, and the House budget does take those funds. Now, have to remember, it's going to the Senate now, and there's probably even more of a conservative viewpoint on that, and you just have to see how those funds end up being used. So.
Thank you. And the last pension-related question. The Attorney General submitted a letter saying portions of Senate Bill 1 are illegal. How are these issues being raised under Attorney General's letter, and how are you going to address those? I'm not, would you like to comment on it?
Yeah, so I got that letter on the day that we explained the bill in committee, which was actually a little bit curious to me because this has been a process that's been going on since late July or August, and I actually hadn't heard anything from the Attorney General, any questions or comments throughout all of this, and I mean, it's been in the public domain as we've gone through these different steps. It started with the PFM report, and then it morphed into another plan. So it's been through several iterations, and this is the first comments we've heard from the Attorney General. We think I'm not convinced that he has grounds on a lot of these issues, but obviously any legislation that's filed, is subject to being litigated, and that determination will be made at some point if some type of suit's filed and it's litigated in court. But I mean, we think it's solid.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just say that, I think the Attorney General has every right to issue a letter and state whether he thinks something is constitutional or not. But at the very end of his letter, when he actually made recommendations for funding, that is not his job. I mean, his job is not to make recommendations on how the legislature should fund the pension system or anything else. And I think the fact that he did that, I think discredited his letter in my view. And I think it was a political letter, and let me say that none of us are going to really like this plan that we end up voting for. There are probably some things in there that will be litigated, and I think for a lot of us, we've got to do something, and we may have to let the litigation take us where it ultimately takes us. And that's that way with any deal.
Okay, anybody else?
Representative Gooch kind of stole about half of what I was going to say. I just think it's important to note that majority of our large issues, when I was talking about difference in philosophy, again, almost every piece of legislation that is a change of philosophy in state government has been challenged or threatened to be challenged by the Attorney General. I kind of view the letter as being political as well. So.
Okay. All right, I think most of the question that was asked about the pension has been answered in one way or the other during the comments as well as some of the responses. So I'm going to go on some other questions. This is a statement from the person here. The current state administration has pursued an unprecedented attack on the working people in Kentucky. Right to work for less, repeal of the prevailing wages, decrease in the workers' comp benefits, overtime pay, unemployment benefits, all those things. Do you have any comments as far as, this is really, hurting the working population in our state? Anybody would like to make any comments on those? And this is basically right to work issue along with the prevailing wage.
Well, I'd agree. I mean, that's damn working thing.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I think obviously there's the differing opinions on this bench up here. I think it's more of a competitive issue, making Kentucky competitive with the states around us and the regions around us. And obviously I hear whispers and there's a huge difference of opinion on this issue. But you can't complain and you can't argue against results. And I think since these issues, particularly prevailing wage and right to work, has been implemented, we've seen an unprecedented amount of interest in the state of Kentucky, of investment coming to the state of Kentucky, and I think you'll see that continue on. The workers' comp changes, unemployment changes are major small business initiatives. There are many small businesses that pay workers' comp and unemployment with no claims for years on years, but yet we still get that premium every year. We still have to pay what is considered high premiums to other states in our region. So I see these as competitive issues, and you'll see these issues continue to be debated in the campaigns coming forward in the legislature, probably for the next several years. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Gooch?
Okay. Let me just say that it's unfortunate that one side, and we've seen this a lot now, when we try to pass policies that move the state forward, everything's a war. We're waging a war on women or a war on workers or a war on public education or whatever. And this is all coming from people who really don't have any solutions, who've been in power for years and have caused many of the problems that we're facing now. And I just find that a little bit disingenuous. They can't offer any solutions other than try to divide us by, the war on whatever group or whatever. But let me just say that, as Representative Mills said, this last year, this state has had a $15 billion, I think it's $15 billion in investments announced in the state of Kentucky, and that's investment that's going to create jobs, and that's a lot more than we've had in recent years. And I think that the thing that really hurts workers is when we have policies that don't create jobs and don't create an environment where people can not only make money, but also give raises and benefits to the employees out there that they depend on to do that. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow this state, create jobs so that people have opportunities, and I don't think that those types of things in any way are war on workers.
Thank you. All right, this is for Representative Miles and Matt Caslin. You added the amount of weight the trucks can haul. This has increased the damage on the roads. Now you introduced the House Bill 609 to raise tax on the gas to repair the roads. This really, put the cost of the trucking damage, and now it's, putting the damage on the working people to pay the higher gas tax.
I'm gonna argue that one with you because we can start with the overweight permits. If you're talking about the aluminum haul bill, most of you all probably heard my floor speech, and if anybody can use a calculator, it actually states that the ground bearing pressure on the highways is not gonna be increased because you're increasing your axles. When you increase your axles, you increase your surface coverage area. And you know, those are things that people sometimes don't dive deep enough into understanding the bill. A lot of the infrastructure problems we have today is because of the lack of the funding and the lack of improvements that we've been willing to do to our highways because of that lack of funding. Look at the freezing and thawing. You can't blame that on politics. You can't blame that on people. Freezing and thawing right now underneath of our road beds have created potholes. When you run over them, you splash the water out, you start creating a bigger hole. So these are arguments that sometimes when people would dive into the details would have a better understanding. When we talk about the overweight, for example, I'm going to use the poultry industry. You know, I grew up on a family farm, and you know, when you load a truck in the field, you're not sitting on the scales. It's really, really hard to see how much weight you put on these vehicles. And you know, when you're at a poultry house, you're loading chickens. You don't know if that chicken weighs 6 pounds or 6.5 pounds, but you have an idea of how many chickens you want to put on the truck. And so we tried to give a variance, just a common sense approach, that when we're out here loading these vehicles in the field and we're on the farms and we're at these aluminum plants, that we make sure that these people can haul their loads from point A to point B without having to worry about being pulled over because of being over a weight or two here or there. And then surrounding states, that aluminum haul bill. There are two different bills when you talk about the 10% variance and then the overweight bill for the aluminum haul. But when Indiana and Tennessee and surrounding states have the same thing, and the load's coming from north through our state, and you have to unload part of your load to be able to travel through our state or go around it, there's a lot of interstates that run through Kentucky. And then when a lot of the aluminum industry is in Kentucky, providing jobs for all of our people that have to go north to some of the automotive industry, we try to give them an advantage so when they load a truck and take off, they're not having to double handle their load. I mean, it's a pretty common sense bill.
Okay.
And I'll reiterate, you know, we did a lot of looking at the weight of the axles, things like that, to make sure that this was a safer, better bill for, and this was a bill from last year. Just keep in mind, this was something that passed last year. And when it went into effect, there was $50,000 worth of permits within the first 3 days of that bill going into effect, and that was $50,000 that went into the road fund. So that didn't damage the road. To me, it was a start. That was just the first 3 days. That was how, just to kind of give you an idea of, you know, we are trying to come up with solutions. We are working towards items that will contribute to better items that take place. But I think that we've also scaled over the effect that the amount of trucks that are on the road, they're the ones that are paying most of the road fund money. So the amount of trucks that are out there, whenever you actually look at how many trucks are on the road and who's actually paying for the fuels and things like that. So I think that's one of the items whenever if you want to say that any vehicle on the road, I know Senator Bowen's filed it multiple times, and I filed it in the House several times too. You know, electric cars use the road and they don't pay any tax whatsoever to pay towards those roads. And so that's whenever we're really trying to look at a lot of different things to make sure that we have road funding. But whenever you look at the transportation budget, not all the money that comes in for transportation is spent on the roads and on the infrastructure and the river ports and all the things that are important to us to have infrastructure. A lot of that money goes to other things. So just kind of keep in mind whenever you look at that to make sure that you know exactly where that's going.
Can I speak to that for just a second?
Yes.
In my job, when I'm not being a representative, one of the things I do is manage a warehouse. And in that warehouse, one of the things we do is we provide warehousing facilities for local aluminum. And what happens day in and day out in our operations is that we will receive a semi-load of aluminum coils that weigh about 16,000 pounds each. Coming into our facility, we have truckloads of 5 coils because of this bill. Going out of our facility, going to Missouri and Illinois, we have truckloads of 3 coils. The reason that there's only 3 coils on those trucks is because when they cross the state line into those other states, they have more restrictive laws about what they can carry. These trucks are state-of-the-art. They really are distributing the weight more evenly so that there is less per square inch weight on the road as these trucks are coming in. Yet because of this bill, we have fewer trucks coming in to bring in the same material that's going out to another state. So how many more additional loads, how many more additional trips, how much more gas, how much more pollution is being created because of the restricted natures of our states, neighboring states' laws compared to what we've done. What we've done is actually make the road less congested, safer, less pollution, and in every way possible, it's just more efficient. And I actually co-signed that, or co-sponsored it, because it's a good bill. And we are not putting additional weight on the roads, we're actually reducing the stress on our roads because of that bill.
You know, with the audience we have, there are a lot of different bills and a lot of questions about them. It's really great. Also, Mr. Johnson, if you continue on House Bill 307, the question is, will your amendment to the KRS 236.060 have any impact on human or environmental safety?
307?
It should be on the screen too. I think that's dealing with the.
Oh, yeah, ask me the question again, make sure I answer.
Okay, all righty. Will that amendment have any impact on human or environmental safety?
No. What that one deals with primarily is a very small quantity items. Effectively, it's the compressors that you can buy at Home Depot and Lowe's for residential use, more or less. And those are inspected, this is exactly what I was talking about. They're actually being inspected by two groups. It's duplicative effort. And so what we've done is provide a little relief for the contractors out there. Again, this is just a small quantity, low volume item that doesn't require the inspection at the commercial level that the larger items does. And it does not impact any of the larger volume, larger capacity systems. It's just trying to make things a little easier for the small business without creating any safety hazards. So the short answer is no.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next one goes to Representative Gooch, who will be represented on an emergency response team for school you are proposing. Will it be community volunteers or paid professionals? House Bill 554. Oh, he left. Okay, all righty. We'll wait for that one. Let's go on the 535. Representative Miles. I'm sorry. 535. Whose bill is that? As a co-sponsor on House Bill 535, do you see utilization on keys? I think this is Suzanne Miles. Money for workforce training, benefiting our Green River area specifically.
Well, the main purpose of this bill right now is the way that these KEYS monies are targeted for four-year institutions and higher ed. With a change in our workforce development, a lot of things, this will enable people to use their KEYS monies towards certifications and things like that, which should be more helpful to go that direction so that we can diversify the opportunities, because not every student that graduates high school goes into a two-year or four-year institution of higher learning. And so this is specifically so that whenever we have certifications, I know the community college is getting ready to start a new program that's modeled out of a group out of California, that I think it is a 7-month program. And so this would be something that the KEYS money, that kid, once the money's been invested in that child and that follows that child, that it actually follows that child to enable them to come up with a really good occupation for what they want to go towards.
Thank you. Senator Ridley, could you please tell us why the Transportation Cabinet stopped sending out notification of driver's licenses?
I thought no one would ever ask that. So I want to ask you all, and I'm serious, have you all looked at your driver's license lately?
Yes.
You all look at it. I mean, I walked into an airport, walked up to get on a domestic air flight, and the gentleman standing there said, "Mr. Ridley, your license has expired." And I said, "You're kidding me. I don't forget those normally, and I don't." And so, Krause, I'm not getting old. I didn't think about that. And so I came back and found out that the Commonwealth of Kentucky quit sending the postcards to save $250,000. Now, I applaud them for trying to save $250,000. But the amount of fines has gone greater than $250,000 and lost time, because what you get cited for that, and it's at just a standard traffic stop, just checking for valid licenses, obviously, and if you have insurance, and you get cited for that, well, you go down at the courthouse, it takes a minute to go to the judge, he lets you off when he sees you got a valid driver's license, but that's lost time. And so I was trying to bring that bill forth. It's Senate Bill 26, but we've been busy with everything else. Hopefully, we'll have a House bill that comes and does that. But I would check your driver's license before you walk out, because it hadn't been but about 2 months ago, my wife looked at hers and it was expired. So it wasn't because she forgot, it was because of, and next time you go get a driver's license, you could choose to get an 8-year license.
On a digital, okay. This is Robbie Mills. House Bill 1 is the co-sponsor of House Bill 1. How do you see the creation of Child Welfare Oversight Committee directly affecting the children in our area? This is the House Bill, I think the part of the House Bill 1 on the child welfare, and, yeah.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
We don't deal with numbers that much. We have nicknames for all of our bills. So if you just say the boiler bill, instant, adoption bill, we've got it. But when we start talking numbers, there's 600 of them.
It's a child welfare bill.
So there's 8,000 or 9,000 children out in the state of Kentucky without families, without parents. We need to make adoption, fostering easier, not harder. We need to be able to have a process that you don't have to go through an attorney and spend $20,000 to adopt a child. There's loving homes out there. We all on this panel can agree that kids need loving homes. When they're in loving homes, their outcomes in the future are much greater. Obviously, this is a priority for the governor and the first lady and many of us that serve in state government. So I see nothing but upsides on this bill, and that's why you see as many people co-sponsoring as is co-sponsoring it, and I'm sure that it'll fly through the Senate as well.
And just to kind of, I want to follow up, there was only one no vote. So when it left the House, there was only one no vote on this bill. So if that kind of gives you an idea of how supportive the House of Representatives, and so it's an amazing bill. And I think that, in the past, there's been the mindset of you need to keep that child with the biological person as long as you possibly could and exhaust all avenues. In the process of that, the children are put in vulnerable situations. And so it doesn't, I don't want to say it expedites the loss of a biological child to someone, but it protects the child. So as a state, I think you'll see that. The First Lady especially, that's been one of her focuses, is to focus towards what's best for the child. And I think that you'll see that going forward.
Thank you, Suzanne. This is kind of related, this is dealing with the joint custody. This House Bill 528, asking that in making the amendments that domestic violence is taken into consideration under House Bill 528. Please recognize that making domestic violence victims share custody with the abuser and adversely affects family dynamics. There is no manner that is safe and in child's best interest where visitation is allowed with an abusive parent. So please keep that in mind when you guys work on the amendment on House Bill 528. Mr. Gooch, who will be represented on the emergency response team for schools? Are you proposing? Would there be community volunteers or the professional staff?
Let me say, it would be professional staff. Now, I don't know if you saw this or not, but Pike County Schools, evidently the schools can already do this. Pike County Schools just allowed something similar to this by the school board this week. What I was trying to do was, one thing is a lot of schools have resource officers, which are really police officers that actually have guns. But if we mandated that, it would be an unfunded mandate to the school system because it's very expensive. What I really wanted is, we saw in the shooting in Florida where teachers, unarmed teachers, were shielding students, giving their lives for those kids. And I have a son that's assistant principal, and I don't want him running unarmed toward the shooters to save his kids. And what this would do is they would have to be in the school staff, principals, it could be even whoever, that the board approved, that goes first through psychological background checks, who also are concealed carry holders, who go through a class created by the training by the Kentucky State Police, and the select few people that would be volunteers that are properly trained would be the ones that would do that, not outside. And we're not trying to arm every teacher. We don't want that. We don't want to arm, have people come in from outside that are strictly school staff. So it's kind of up to the school board to decide which route they wanted to go. But the reason I come up with this other idea was so that we're not putting an unfunded mandate on the school system.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, and I think we're done. This is the statement, the funding for senior programs. As you know, so many seniors are here from all 7 counties today. Have been steadily decreasing or level funding for many years. All of us know the senior population is probably one of the fastest growing population in our region. Would that be possible to at least keep in mind to keep the funding at the level or also increase the funding for the seniors? That's, I guess, goes to all of you, and all of you know that, and we do believe very strongly about that, so keep that in mind. I got one more on that, but I think Senate Bill 5, which was already passed the Senate, the question has been that, could the $340 million that had been saved in healthcare taxes help the issues we in Kentucky are experiencing with depleted pension and education funds, as well as save over independently owned community pharmacies? I don't know what that Senate Bill 5 passing would address that or not, but I think they're talking about all the savings that you made on the, would they help them in pharmacy and all? Okay, all right.
I think that passed the Senate 34-4. Scroll that up a little bit and see if that's not what the vote count was.
Zero, wasn't it?
No, we had 4 no votes. 32, excuse me, 32-4. But, for those of us, now I know Owensboro, Davis County wouldn't consider themselves to be rural, but I certainly live, and my district is in a rural area, and independent pharmacists are so important to our health care. And they have been through the PBMs, which are the money managers. Did you know a PBM just gets money, handles the money, and pays it out? They don't have anything to do with the drugs themselves, do they? They don't have a thing to do with the drugs. They just
rebates from the drugs.
Exactly, clawbacks. And so, I think this bill, you might think at the start that it might cost the Commonwealth more money. I think at the end, it will pay the Commonwealth, and it'll certainly help small business where I'm from in rural Kentucky. So, I'm for the bill. I think before it's all over with, we'll see the House will deal with it, and there'll be more negotiations in regards to those PBMs that are coming in, and all they're doing is walking away with our money, and I think that's wrong. Thank you.
Yes.
And one other thing too, I think that's certainly a bill we need to look at when it comes over to the House. But this week, we passed a bill out of the committee, I think it was, in the House, related to, right now, if a lot of pharmacists, local pharmacists, they have a contract with the, I guess, the companies that pay them or whatever, but they're not even allowed, if a customer comes in and they've got a $30 copay, but yet they can buy another drug and paperwork themselves by cash and pay $10, what's happening is they're not allowed to tell that customer that you can pay cash and only pay $10, and then what's happening is that the pharmacy benefit manufacturer is getting a clawback on that, and then they're charging $30, and so this bill does change that where, and I think that's also another bill that needs to go along with Senate Bill 5.
So ask your pharmacist when you walk up, because he's in a, what do they call it, a gag order.
Yeah.
They don't make any more money than what they finally sell it to you for, so just ask.
Okay.
The what you said, Representative Gooch, about the gag order on the clawbacks is accurate. As well, that you don't know, is that we're not supposed to talk to government officials. about this. The PBMs actually intend, with their contracts, to keep everything that's going on in the dark. We are risking our contracts with PBMs to bring this into the light. And I want you to consider this, everyone here. The Medicaid program is 100% funded by our tax dollars. These PBMs are using our tax dollars, every one of us in this room, to fill their pockets and to try to eliminate their competition. Those of us in rural areas that have a extremely high percentage of Medicaid patients are in jeopardy of not being able to survive, because at this point, on average, we are losing money on every Medicaid prescription that comes to the door. I'm not talking about trying to make more money. They're not paying us enough to replace the medication. So I urge everyone here to contact your representatives in support of Senate Bill 5 as well as House Bill 463 that prevents me from saying this to anyone. You consider that. If you don't want it in the light, then you've got something to hide. That's all I have to say.
Okay, is this on the same issue?
On the same
Okay.
issue. I'm 67, so I'm on Medicare.
Yes.
So I don't know if this affects anything or not, but I went in 4 or 5 weeks ago to my pharmacy, and I needed a specific product, and it's really expensive. And I asked them, I said, is there anything else that can be done with this? And she said, well, you're on Medicare. They won't let me give you this discount. The difference was, I could have had that product for either $10 or $20. And yet I ended up paying $167 because I was on Medicare. And I don't understand how that works, but it may not be in y'all's realm at all.
If it is a branded product with no generic and the discount came from a loyalty card, there are restrictions placed on the loyalty card for folks that have insurance that is government assisted, that would be Medicare and Medicaid. That may be the situation, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we can have some time discussion afterwards to Mr. Gooch.
Earlier, there was a question asked about senior product programs, and we need to address that. One of the problems that I've seen for years is that, we have lots of programs out there that help seniors, whether it be the Meals on Wheels or the home visits and all those types of things that really pay for themselves, because that keeps the person in their home. And if that person, we don't give them that, often they end up in a nursing home that's going to cost us more money. So I said earlier today that, so many times there's things that are expenses, but there's things that are investments. And I think that these programs that help our seniors save us money in the long run, but until we get a handle on this pension problem, we're limited as to what we can do. And ultimately, I think we're trying to solve that issue. Then we need to do comprehensive tax reform, and we'll be able to make those investments, I hope, that help our seniors so much. And I'm one of them. I'm one of you. So.
Thank you very much. It was very well said. There's only other comment, the last one, that has nothing to do with the bills or anything. However, there has been a comment that why they are not maintaining, I hope this is right, the USO in all the veterans clinics. At present, there's Grayson Clinic has no rep, and Owensboro only has one on Wednesday. This is very poor service for our veterans and their benefits. So just keep that in mind. If you have any comments and questions.
I can comment on that. I know that whenever they came and presented in front of us in the Budget Review Subcommittee, that part of the discussion and the asking for additional funds were for service officers. The problem blatantly comes down to money. So funding is the problem, but at the end of the day, the service officers are very important. We've actually been talking with a few different ones that have been working in, I know that we have volunteer service officers, and then we actually have paid by the state officers. So we're trying to work with them to see if we can work out something that we can get better training for our volunteers, and hopefully we'll get better access for our veterans.
Thank you.
May I rebut that a little bit? I'm a service officer in Ohio County, and what I'm finding out that Grayson, KDVA is supposed to have somebody there.
Ohio County's supposed to have somebody, Davis County's supposed to have somebody there. The one in Davis County comes 1 day a week over here to service the veterans. Grayson County has nobody coming over there by appointment on Monday only. Now, I made a proposal one time to the KDVA, why not train some of us so we can fill in these gaps? And they basically hung up on it.
Well, that's exactly the same conversation that I've had with them recently. I don't want to say,
ridiculous.
I don't want to say that they've hung up on me, but that was the conversation recently that I've had with them, because we had one in Union County that he's actually the one in Davis County, which he does a phenomenal job, but he's not here as many days as we would like. I believe has he increased to 2 days a week? Lou can tell us, I know.
I believe we're talking about KDVA, and they are here on Wednesdays and I believe on Thursdays. But what a lot of people don't know is that your veteran service organizations, your VSOs, have service officers. So you can go to the American Legion, you can go to the VFW, you can go to the DAV. Those people are there also to support the veterans and supplement what the state is doing. And there is supposed to be programs available to increase KDVA if they ever get any money.
And that was the conversation I actually had with the deputy of KDVA, Heather French Henry, that this past week, that a lot of those conversations, if we're not going to put service officers from KDVA specifically in every place that more or less the field reps, then we need to make sure that we enable some training for our locals to make sure they have all the information they have, so, and enable that. So those conversations are taking place, and I appreciate your interest on that.
Thank you. Again, thank all of you. Now, you have a booklet in front of you. That one has all contact information for all the legislators, so you can always contact them. And I'll turn it over to my chairman.
We want to thank all of you for coming today and for the discussion we've had, and help me thank our legislators for the job they do. They have a tremendously difficult job. They do it well and they represent us well. Have a safe trip home today. Thank you for being here.